Hello everyone. I'm Dr. Pratyush Kumar and I'm chair of Wonka Rural South Asia and secretary of Rural Wonka executive members. I'm basically from rural parts of Bihar, India, and today I'm going to talk about a very important topic, rural effects of climate change. So before we begin, let me introduce to this topic that why this is very much important. Why we are talking about climate change per se for rural population. Because rural population is vulnerable in many senses because of its economic uncertainties, because they have got much reliance and interdependency on industries that are sensitive to climate change. Even the infrastructure which is available are very less resilient. There is lower levels of access to community and emergency services. The transport facility, as we call about access, in form of access to healthcare or access to economic opportunities or any form of access, the transportation facility is quite, if we compare to the urban areas, is much worse. And obviously, it has been talked a lot about the inequities, gross inequities, which is prevalent, and the rural population has suffered for a long period of time because of inequities. If we talk about the health workforce which is available uh, from urban to rural areas, or the resources which are available in rural areas, or in any form, whether you call about the employment, whether you call about the education, whether you call about the schools, colleges, or if you talk about the complete social determinants of health, there is a very poor social determinants of health in the rural population. And then if we talk about the population demography, that's also that may vary from low and middle income countries to very developed countries. But in general, the elderly population and the younger population are much more vulnerable. And the rural population, because of its own very much different aspects, makes them more prone to disease, infections, and climate change has really aggravated everything. So let's talk about how rural population is getting affected by various important concerns which we see, like the temperature related morbidity. So these all the things which I'm going to describe here is can affect the urban population also, and also affects the rural population. But the problem with rural population is because of their vulnerability, they are affected multiple times more than the urban population. If we say about temperature related morbidities, that heat strokes plus the cardiovascular illnesses are much more common in the rural population. Then very important is the vector-borne diseases. Like the changing pattern of diseases by region and climate parameters like malaria, filariae, kala-azar, Japanese encephalitis, and dengue, and other bacteria, parasites, and all the arboviral diseases are very much common in rural areas. If we look at the patterns, that there are some mosquitoes which are much more common in the rural areas. For example, Culex mosquitoes, the primary vector of West Nile virus, find a combination of vegetation and the drought flooding cycles in rural areas an appealing habitat. Whereas the Aedes aegypti mosquito, the primary vector of dengue, chikungunya, and Zika virus, are more common in the urban areas. Then, if we look at other diseases, the other health effects of climate change and extreme weather, they include diarrhea, cholera, and intoxication caused by biological and chemical determinants in water. Damaged public health infrastructure due to cyclone and floods. They make the access to the healthcare. Access is key to healthcare, and that's where that gets hampered. So already they are suffering from various causes which I have enumerated, and when they try to approach the nearest rural health facility, they are unable to do so because of lack of transport facilities, lack of health workforce, lack of resources, then injury and illnesses because of changing weather climates, droughts, floods. It increases the risk to injury and illnesses. Then all these physical health problems, if they are so much prevalent, then obviously there will be mental health problems. Mental health issues are very much prevalent in rural areas. The main cause of prevalence of the mental health issues are because of various physical problems like diarrhea, cholera, malaria, all these vector-borne diseases. They have got their own consequences because a family which has got a sole breadwinner, if he gets sick, then the whole family gets affected, and it also affects their mental health. Then if there is a drought is there, if there are floods are there, then it also affects the food production. And if the food production is less, then it leads to malnutrition. It leads to hunger, particularly in children. And as we know, that malnutrition and hunger are not just physical problems. It leads to developmental issues. It leads to mental health issues at later ages. So we need to really look the climate effects of to rural health in a very comprehensive way. It's not just affects the physical health, but also affects mental health in a very grievous way. We also have seen suicides in rural areas because of changing weather climates, droughts, floods, which hampers their economy, which hampers their daily livelihood, which hampers their family. So now talk about some other important aspects. That's migration. Climate change has led to migration. And in a way, migration poses a double threat. Double threat in that way because it makes us vulnerable to urban diseases also. Already, the rural population is suffering from its own deficiencies. But because of migration, they also have to suffer from urban based issues. There is growing urbanization in rural areas because of, if you look at demography, our urban population is gradually increasing and rural population is gradually decreasing. So the diseases which were unknown in rural areas, now we are seeing in the rural population. So we need to consider this part as migration. Now, if we see outbreaks, all those viral or the outbreaks which passes from human to human, like the recent coronavirus outbreak, we have seen in our country that when persons travels from one place to other place, they're also transmitting infections. So all those who have gone to urban areas for their own livelihood, when they're coming back to their hometown, they're coming back with some diseases and spreading to the whole village. So obviously these things are very important to consider. Migration has also caused one more issue, our dependency to packaged and processed food. Because earlier in rural areas, agriculture was the main livelihood. People used to cultivate and then they used to eat that food. But as more and more people to earn money, they have to migrate to urban areas. People are more dependent on packaged and processed food, which their genetic makeup and which their physical makeup is is not able to accept or they're unable to cope up with. But we should also think about why there's migration. It's because there's so much of droughts and floods which are going on. There's loss of rural livelihood options because of growing industrialization and use of fertilizers, use of uh, many technology which can enhance your production. So the earlier earlier methods, which are natural methods, they're now they are finding it very difficult to sustain those ways to do the agriculture practices. But I'm sure that with coming times, there is a growing fancy over use of natural foods. Going There's much more fancy, that there's much more attraction to our use of organic foods like farm to fork. This concept has come up into place. So I hope that in the next coming years, next coming months, people will realize what's the importance of use of organic food, what's the importance of use of agriculture in its most natural way. And it will also increase the rural employability, and the people will find it easier to sustain in the rural climate. Now let's talk about the rural livelihood. As I've talked about, it's very much climate sensitive. The jobs apart from agriculture, which is totally dependent upon rain, the soil quality, what the quality of soil is there, whether there is rain or not. Even if there isn't rain, people tend to migrate to some other areas where there are good rain, where there's good soil quality. So that's very much important to understand in this context. Then the livestock husbandry. Livestock husbandry is something which is dependent on uh, weathers and also climate changes. We now see lots of cases of bird flu or something has come up like seasonal thing. It's a viral disease happening in birds, and that's also affecting the rural population great extent. Now the wild herbs and the fuel woods, although the burning of woods cause air pollution, but that's also been in the past the major cause of the employment. And now we should also talk about some novel health risks. Like from the place where I am, it's in Bihar, we have seen acute encephalitis syndrome outbreaks. It occurs every season when there is lychee harvesting season, and we see the rural population who belongs to the lower economic strata of society, they are most affected. And there have been many hypotheses like climate change, the malnutrition, taking unripe lychee, or the use of all the chemicals to make sure that the lychee fruit grows well. So there are lots of hypotheses which is going around, but one thing is very much certain: climate change has definitely a role to play, because every time there is a rain, all these encephalitis outbreaks goes away. So rain is like a treatment for these outbreaks. So you can understand that how much important the climate change is for rural population and the health issues. Now the zoonotic diseases. There are multiple reports regarding spillage of viruses from uh, animals to humans. Like recent outbreaks has also been supposed to come from animals. There have been also past outbreaks like MERS and SARS, where camels and the cats have been involved. So these are also very important to consider, because in some way we are invading the space which was naturally for the wildlife. We have started increasing their space. So in a way we have also attracted their diseases in our lives. So we must consider our behavior and obviously our greed. Now let's talk about SDGs. It's very important to understand how climate change is affecting us. If we look at our SDGs and these goals, because these are the sustainable development goals, which is much talked about in any conferences. WHO is focusing on SDGs. So let's talk the effects of climate change in terms of SDGs, that how it's affecting the rural population in particular. So the first is the end poverty in all forms everywhere. And you know that how social determinants of health is there in the rural areas. So climate change is a major threat to poverty reduction, because it damages the housing and infrastructure from extreme events, worsened food and water insecurity, there's loss of livelihoods, there's reduced ability to work through heat and diverse effects on health. Climate change could force more than 3 million to 16 million people into extreme poverty by 2030. mostly through impacts on agriculture and food prices. Number of deaths, missing persons, and persons affected by disaster will tend to increase. So there is need to build a resilient infrastructure. Although it will be difficult to achieve in the face of increasing frequency and severity of climate related disasters like heat waves, fires, drought, storms, sea level rise, floods, it has been estimated that 3,546 to 4,508 million people would be exposed to heat waves with warming of 1.5 degrees Celsius. The next is end hunger, achieve food security, and improve nutrition and promote sustainable agriculture. So it has been estimated that around 1.5 degrees Celsius rise in temperature is associated with increase in the global undernourished population of 530 to 550 million and to 540 to 590 million at 20 degrees Celsius. So these things are very much important to understand that how global warming is affecting the population, and it will affect more the vulnerable population which are there in the rural areas. We need to ensure the healthy lives and promote well-being for all at all ages. This is all a part of SDG 3, and so these are the goals. So if we talk about the climate change, so these preventable diseases, which include major causes of child mortality, are projected to worsen the distribution of malaria, dengue, and neglected tropical diseases, waterborne diseases, and other communicable diseases. It's projected to change the net increase in climate related risks in most cases. We have talked about the waterborne diseases. The common which we see in our country is diarrhea, typhoid. These cases are going to increase because first is the water table is going down and down. Even in the rural areas, it's going very much deeper and deeper. So there is need for water conservation. Earlier, it was more heard in the urban areas where they used to talk about water conservation, but it's also equally important in rural areas. We need to also talk about mental health because whenever physical health is affected, mental health is equally involved, equally affected. And food and water insecurity are the major drivers of mental illnesses. Loss of livelihoods may lead to suicide. So we need to carefully plan our strategies and our policies. We must ensure availability and sustainable management of water and sanitation for all. Where sanitation is concerned, obviously, globally there have been lots of efforts, but in India, there have been a policy change to make India open defecation free. Open defecation free has led to various diseases, and we have worked really hard to make sure that India is open defecation free, like building toilets in the homes, giving them incentives to build toilets, be coming out with policy measures to stop open defecation. But these things, that climate change like increasing temperature, unpredicted rainfall patterns, will tend to increase the mortality from bacterial enteric diseases. It will worsen the water availability and quality of water. Sanitation systems relying on water supplies will also be less resilient as a result of increasing frequency and the severity of climate related extreme events and disasters. It has been estimated that warming of 1.5 degrees Celsius would result in 496 million people exposed and vulnerable to water stress. Next is ensure access to affordable, reliable, sustainable, and modern energy for all. That's very much needed in rural areas because what we see in rural areas is the wood burning, chulha, what we call in our villages chulha. That's very much common, and it's like Without wood burning, no one can make their own food. But in India, what we have seen, there has been a scheme called Ujjwala scheme, where LPG cylinders were being provided to rural households at free of cost to some population, and others have been incentivized to use LPG cylinders. That's in a way government has promoted free and clean energy for rural population so that we can shift from a wood burning facilities to a safer energies. It has led to decreased respiratory diseases because we have seen most of our cases of COPD, chronic obstructive pulmonary diseases in rural population, especially women, because most of the time they are the one who use the chulhas and the wood burning. So it has really led to improve in the women's health. If used LPG cylinder, it affects the quality and it affects the quality of life. They have got much better quality of life and they can lead a much happier life. The next SDG short 3 talks about the promote sustained, inclusive, and sustainable economic growth, full and productive employment, and decent work for all. So heat exposure will reduce ability to perform physical work, especially outdoors, because of global warming. We are seeing these things. There will be increase in mortality and morbidity from occupational heat exposures. For agriculture, we see many farmers going out working day and night in out in the farms. So if the temperature will increase, they will be affected most because of global warming. So these are some difficult times, and we need to understand because their sole bread and butter is agriculture. There must be some adaptation measures which we need to discuss to make sure that how much we can decrease their risk from this global warming. We need to take urgent actions to combat climate change and its impacts. That's the most important thing. That's what the whole exercise is. We need to develop some resilience and adaptive capacity, which has already been weakened because of lots of vulnerabilities the rural population are exposed to, like frequent heat waves, fires, droughts, storms, sea level rise, floods, have made our rural population have weakened our rural population to a great extent. So we need to really look after these aspects as well. To promote peaceful and inclusive societies for sustainable development, provide access to justice for all, and build effective, accountable, inclusive institutions at all levels. Soil degradation, freshwater scarcity, population pressures, and other forces that are related to climate are all potential cause of conflict. These are some great cause of conflict which we see in our daily lives happening in our villages. Fight over land, fight over water. These have become very common issues nowadays. The relationships are not straightforward. However, as many factors influence conflict and violence, and the evidence is contested, also it is noted that population affected by violence are particularly vulnerable to the impacts of climate change on health and social well-being. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Pratyush, and an excellent presentation. And I see you outside there. Before I hand over to you, I'd just like to note that we've got Bill Burdick with us tonight, and Bill's very nicely got up at 5 o'clock. Bill's the chair of Towards Unity for Health, who we're partnering with in this series, and so it's great to have him along. He said he'd just listen in. I said no, I'll get him to make some comments along the way and obviously be part of the conversation. So thanks, Bill, for your support, and thanks for joining us. We also I would note that some of our Canadian colleagues have found it a bit more difficult if they're on the West Coast, because they're in the middle of the night. So they've actually asked for their apologies to be noted, particularly the Society of Rural Physicians of Canada. And they've asked to be given the link to this afterwards. Just on that, the links, we're just having a little bit of trouble with out there in the climate. So I'll just hand over to you and try and look at any comments coming in that we can refer on to you. Over to you, mate.
Yeah. So thank you everyone for joining this discussion. It's a very important topic on climate change. And as you know that rural areas do have their own vulnerabilities, and these newer challenges keep coming up every now and then. And climate change was there and still going on. It's something which is going to affect us in the future. And so I would like to have your stories, because rural areas is just beyond stats. It's all about stories, and each person, each family has its own stories to tell. And something it's very unique that lots of stats which come out from rural areas may not be very much representative, because the population, each family, is so much of diversity there. So I'd like to have your opinions, your views, what you're saying.
Pratyush, congratulations and wonderful presentation. It was excellent, Pratyush. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am, please go.
Bruce, can I say something, Bruce?
Yes, please. Yep.
I'm really very glad that you touched almost everything. I would like to share that these climate change, how rural people utilize it as opportunities. Actually, I'm still working on the project which was supported by Gates, actually. That when the rains were there, these people, they used to eat mahua. It's a fruit. I know, I understand Pratyush must be knowing. And I wondered whether it is causing, because they used to make beverage, alcoholic beverage. Now, when I went to these villages, I learned that they not only make alcoholic, but they eat it. It gives calorie, sodium, electrolyte balance. So it's called mahua, and they used to survive on that. And they learned that to add salt to it, like bread and salt and this mahua. So it becomes their survival. So how they searched and they survives with protein, then electrolytes and calories and everything. This I learned from them, how they learned with climate change. The other thing which I learned was that, which actually told them that you can do. We went to a village, we were working in 140 village, and there were some 6 very difficult. And one village was actually cut off from the rest of the villages and everywhere for nearly 8 months. So I said, what do you do? So they said, they tried to use animals and take somehow women. So I approached the local district authorities, that they said, because it is forest area, we cannot make bridges. I said, how can you allow these people to survive without any connection? And I gave them an idea that you can make iron bridges, as we have in hilly areas where you cannot make bridges. And believe me, the commissioner of the area took interest. He told his own people, you should have told all these things over the years, and you didn't tell. And they not only made a bridge, it was not iron bridge, they made a small bridge, because trucks are not allowed in the area, because people take wood from there. It's a forest. So now it's a road, which is cement road, from where a small 4-wheeler can go. So even ambulance can go. So actually villagers thank me that you gave the idea, and now this is there. No trucks, but still villagers have an ambulance going. The third you brought about migration was, this is really a big problem, which I have seen. They have to go somewhere for livelihood. Women die because they don't get antenatal care. And when they come back, nobody knows about them. And I have seen some women actually dying because suddenly they were brought and then they were shifted from one hospital to another and they died. The fourth thing which you brought was about chulas, that now we are working, it's Indian Council of Medical Research. They have supported this biofuel mass use and effects on pregnancy outcome and other disorders. We are finishing last year of the project. Ujjwala has been given to some villagers, but refill is just zero. And Maharashtra, you know, is one of the three best doing states. So you can imagine about EAG states what must be happening. I'm coming from the state which is one of the best out of the three which are best. There I have every information about 140 villages. In some villages, cylinders were given, there's no doubt, but refill is just non-existent. So still 80% of those villages in Maharashtra are using chula. And now I'm working, so anemia is nearly 90%. Hypertensive disorders are more. They have eye problems, they have ear problems, respiratory problems because of this chula. And low birth weight is almost 60%. So I'm compiling, and you will read the article somewhere. I'm actually total 16 articles are coming out of this whole research. And I'm going to publish practically everything, the whole thing which we did in last 2.5 years. March, we will be finishing this. And the last which I would like to comment is about water. It's a real problem. There are wells which are uncovered. There's no system of having, what do you say, on which day bleaching was done, put, and nobody knows. It is put sometimes. And one village, I actually, Public Health Secretary of Maharashtra was with me. We were together. I showed him the village where the village was so full in rainy water that a cow could drink directly. And the other was rivers, water being used, where buffaloes being washed, clothes were being washed, their grains were being washed, and their utensils were being washed. So these are real issues with climate change, where rains and other things change, and then the villagers suffer a lot. Once again, my congratulations for this wonderful talk touching practically everything. Thank you, Pratyush, and all the best for future work.
You're on mute, Pratyush.
Thank you. Thank you. And the mahua tree, you can see it in our backyard. That's the mahua tree.
And
So,
they pluck so much.
yeah,
Every family, many families have
yeah.
on their backwards.
Yeah, no, but here in our village, there's an old tradition that they feed this mahua to the pregnant ladies.
Yes.
They feel that it's very nutritious, and it's very nutritious, like it has got some iron content or something like that, protein. So that there's a long tradition of feeding to the mahua. They also feed to the pregnant cows. Here we have got cows also. They feed to them also. So it's very useful in our villages. Thank you, ma'am.
Pratyush, we've got a question from Manish. Don't know if Manish, you might like to unmute and just ask Pratyush yourself, or I can mention it.
Yep.
Yeah. Hello.
Manish. Go ahead.
Yeah, this is Manish. Hi, Pratyush. It was a very excellent. I learned new things from your presentation, and I'm very much curious to know. You have mentioned so many things in this presentation, but what do you think? What is the single most important thing need to focus in current scenario?
Look, if you'll ask about the single most challenge, what's there in the rural area, the single most challenge would be the access.
All right.
Single word, if you want, the single word is access. Access is key. If you take it, access to information, access to resources, access to healthcare services, even from health workforce perspective, if you think about access to a better conditions, better salary. So these things in a single word is access is the key. That's when it differentiates rural between urban. Urban, we have all kind of accesses, information, facilities, everything is there. But in rural areas, the only thing which is less is access. So that's the key thing which policymakers should concentrate on.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Pratyush.
Thank you.
Anyone else want to make a comment?
Yeah, Bruce, I posted something in the chat, just a question. One of the things, Pratyush, thanks for that talk. That was terrific. One of the things that came to my mind was that to adapt to many of these environmental issues, we need to partner with our engineering colleagues. And I wonder if anyone on the webinar has some examples of the successful partnership with our engineering colleagues.
Can I say something?
Shakantula, go ahead.
Actually, what he said is it's 2012 onwards we are working, and unless you become a team in rural areas, you cannot work. So engineering people help in infrastructure. They actually give you ideas. Sometimes you feel that this is not possible to do as far as health is concerned, and then you discuss with them, this is my problem, this is the, and they definitely, especially we are having chimneys in some villages. He brought about the smoke also, chula. I didn't put, wanted others to ask questions. We wanted to put chimneys so that smoke gets away, and the huts were so fragile. We called for tenders, and it was so expensive chimneys that government of India said we can't give this much of money. I had little money and I wanted to help these 100 villages. Finally, we have been able to put in 10 villages, but these engineering people came out. I told them I don't want this smoke to, I can't change their huts. I can't make windows and doors in their huts, but I want the smoke to go out. So I discussed that with them about roads, infrastructure, and these chimneys. And now the chimney, which then costed, I should say, 20% of the cost, which was by regular system. And now we have in these 10 villages, the data will be, I will be compiling and I will know, but whatever I know is making a real change, that this smoke is going out now from the chimneys, and this was through engineers. So when you want to help rural people, you become a team of any person who can give you ideas. So be it water, be it smoke going out, or be it the way they live, the way they make their huts so that it is health friendly, I should say, and it helps. So we have seen not so much in Sevagram. I'm there since 1975, but we didn't have those that many interactions. But 2012, since the time I'm working in Melghat, this is a forestry region where we really strongly believe that they really help you reaching improving health and promoting health, I should say. Thank you.
Yeah, one thing more I want to add it here, that look, whatever evidence we get from all over the world may not be very much applicable in the rural areas. First thing is that acceptability. Here, we need to make sure that whatever interventions we are making is acceptable to the population or not. Because that's the problem with the Ujjwala scheme is there. People, those who are using chulha to make the food and those who are using LPG to make the food, they occasionally complain that the taste of the food is changing. They're not getting the same taste of the food. Understood? So there's a lot of things it will take time to change, and it will come over a longer period of time. You can't expect changes over a weekend, but we need to make sure that whatever evidence is there and whatever we want to apply it in the rural areas, we must make sure that it's acceptable to them, the population, or we should find the way, best ways to convince them, to make it, normalize them, so that they can accept and use it for a long period of time. The changes should be sustainable.
I just want to say, I think that is a fantastic point, that idea of the taste being different, because unless that is addressed, forget about any acceptance of innovation. Great point.
Bill, could I chip in there?
Nandita.
Go ahead, Nandita. Yep.
Nandita, hi.
Great to see
So
you.
I think, Bruce, hi. Can I mention something there? Actually, thank you. I think when it comes to engineering solutions, especially when it comes to a COVID-19 era, we have really used engineering services to its hilt. Not only have we designed barricades between the clinician and the patients, we've also got sample collection booths made locally, especially when this knowledge of. Am I audible?
Yeah.
Am I audible? Did you get that?
Yes.
So basically, during the so we even have sample collection booths that we've made, not really related to your topic, Pratyush, especially regarding air pollution, but I would say as regards transmission of the virus in the environment, yes, we've taken a lot of help from local engineering solutions. Yeah, thanks.
One of the big issues, I think, Pratyush, is that we've got potentially access issues on top of already access issues, isn't it? And it's trying to get the innovations for rural areas, possibly with things like small-scale hydro and potentially cheaper solar panels, those sort of things in future, access to these things. But very basic things, as you say, about sanitation and all those sort of things. Do you see, what opportunities do you see, particularly for pretty cash-strapped areas already, poorer areas, to be able to do some of this innovation at low cost? I know India is famous for it. I mean, your pharmaceutical industry has revolutionized health in rural areas through access to anti-HIV drugs and all those sort of things. What other sorts of innovations do you see coming in India in particular? You're on mute.
We need to make sure that whatever innovation comes, it must be cost effective.
Yes.
That's the key, because we have huge population to cater. Around 60% is rural population, and most of them do suffer from out of the pocket expenditure when it's come to health expenditure. So these innovation must be cost effective. Otherwise, there won't be any solution for that. And that's the major hurdle when we implement these global evidences. These global evidences comes with huge price tag, which these rural populations fail to get in. We must design all the solutions in a way which even the rural and the grassroots population can access. They can, and whatever solutions we offer them must be sustainable. It should not be a one-time access. It should be a sustainable way, and it should be cost effective. Thank you.
I noticed Ewan McPhee was making a comment about the Indigenous population and looking at sustainability. Ewan, did you want to add anything to what Pratyush just said?
Look, thank you, Bruce. I think I've just been quite moved by a book that's been really written in Australia about our First Nations people, and I'm just going to type it into the box there. Some of the issues that we need to look at is that our unique biospheres that we have within our different countries are often been ignored by introduction of animals and plants that are not suited to those climates or those environments. And often also the Indigenous or First Nations people, their held knowledge can be quite significant in how you could better use that land. And I think that's been a clear transformative message for me from reading that book, which was specifically about Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Australia. But yeah, it's an interesting issue.
Thanks. I see Lizzie Igbine, you had a comment about just food scarcity, hunger and poverty. Did you want to chip in there at all, Lizzie?
Hello, good morning,
Yeah,
good afternoon, everybody. My name is Lizzie from Nigeria. I lead the women in agriculture. I want to ask, this Wonka, is it for Asians, or can you work in Africa and can you work in other rural communities like in Nigeria?
Yes, we do have Wonka Rural Africa.
Okay, can you connect us with them? Because I think that we can transform our rural communities from poverty to wealth. especially as we are discussing of water, we are discussing of energy, we can introduce the solar, and we can make agriculture more profitable and make our rural communities enterprising. So this is my contribution, because I've been part of this program, but I've never asked questions. But I think I'm getting more interested and understanding what is happening here. And I want to ask if is there any way that we in Nigeria can be connected?
Thanks, Lizzie. Yes, we have. We've actually had a conference in Nigeria in the past in Calabar, a Wonka conference, and we've had people and have people on our board from Nigeria. I think you make a really important point that we need to look at local solutions and making them really efficient. And I think COVID's taught us that as well, that we can't rely on flying things around the world. We need to have that more local and sustainable solutions, and hopefully rural can lead in some of that. Any other comments on that?
I was just going to ask Lizzie to restate her connection to the agricultural community. I missed that.
Yes, yeah. Hello, I am the leader of the Nigerian Women Agro-Allied Farmers Association. We are a farming group, and we are all over the country, and we work in communities. We even work with UNICEF on environmental friendly agriculture.
If you could put the organization in the chat, that would be helpful.
Put your details in the chat, yeah. And what we're hoping to do is when we, or planning to do is when we put the link to this up, we'll also put the chat up so that you'll be able to go back and review the chat from the various presentations. So that would help, but it'd be very interesting to hear from you. Anyone else got any comments about how we can make this? I mean, obviously we're all wanting our countries, our governments and ourselves to try and contribute to slowing down climate change, but it does look like we're going to have to adapt and deal with it, because it looks like we're probably 20 years too late to stop some effects of climate change. But any other ideas people have got about the ability to adjust, and for rural areas that are already fairly hard hit sometimes by access issues? We've got the king of access here at the moment, Roger Strasser. Roger says there's 3 problems, I think, in rural: access, access, and access. Rog, did you have anything you'd like to add about the opportunities and threats of climate change?
I'm not sure about the king thing.
I think you're the crowd, Roger. Yeah, I think you're
I mean, picking up on comments that various people have made, including you, and I think one of the key issues for people living in rural and remote communities is that, you know, they often really know what they can do or could do, but they're not supported to do it. And so it's recognition and valuing the knowledge and the expertise locally and encouraging that kind of initiative. So I think, you know, interesting sort of combination of effects really of the COVID-19 pandemic. You know, actually there was a reduction in the output of greenhouse gases because of the shutting down of the international air network and lockdowns and the like. So it shows that a concerted action around the world can make a difference in a relatively short time in terms of production of greenhouse gases at the sort of very big picture, and then at the local level. I think the experience of the pandemic has really put the focus, on the one hand, bringing to sharp focus the existing disparities and inequities. On the other hand, really valuing self-sufficiency and resourcefulness, and highlighting the importance of actually building capacity in remote and rural communities to have to be able to deal with crises as they come along, and the the environmental issues is a sort of an ongoing crisis that's gaining momentum and really requires that sort of concerted efforts, and so, once again, support at the local level for activities that ensure quality potable water and sanitation and the sort of the basics of health and well-being, and then building capacity. As Pratyush said, it's also about the economic dimensions of it. So it's actually economic development and improvement in people's livelihoods, which then adds value and moves the dial in a way that's positive and productive for people living in remote and rural communities.
I think that's a challenge for organisations like ours and Towards Unity for Health, is trying to spread the good ideas between rural communities, but also have the policymakers, Roger, in the cities get over that geographic narcissism you talk about, and enable rural communities to be able to propose their own solutions and implement their own solution.
Agree.
We've got Lizzie's shared her details, so that's good. Thanks, Lizzie. Does anyone have any particular examples of where there has been a major change? I know our speaker just recently from Nepal. I mean, Nepal's a good example that we've talked about in the past with small hydro in a lot of the villages. A lot of the villages now have reasonable self-sufficiency in some of their power requirements. As we're just talking about with solar, although solar is expensive, it's becoming somewhat cheaper. But there are still these major issues of, even as Pratyush and others have pointed out, about sanitation and the climate issues. Pratyush, any comments?
Look, in the rural area, sanitation has always been an issue because of how the people lived. Initially, they used to change places. There was no any fixed home for them. So once they found their home, the toilet was not their main priority. Priority was different, to get food. And since there was long fields, toilet came last in the priorities. Then gradually with the civilization, the thought of having a toilet. Even with toilet, the how to manage the waste was also not known. So gradually people came to know all those things and developed. Earlier in our village, most of the houses used to be of mud and this bricks came way later on, plaster came way later on. Initially they used to make it only with the mud and kapda, what you call. So with development, these kind of sanitation took the back seat. And now with past 2 decades, we are seeing much more emphasis on sanitation, because still, if we look at the disease indices, diarrheal diseases tops the list, still after so much of development. And with these and open defecation free movement, we are seeing a decline in diarrheal diseases. So, thank you.
I noticed Ewan saying that they're 100% solar now. Must have a pretty good battery system. Ewan, can you just talk to us about how you managed to do that with the solar?
Oh,
Yeah,
thanks, Bruce.
Here we don't.
So go ahead.
No, go ahead, Ewan.
Yeah. No, just wanting to think about some of the ways we can just do things individually. Our practice is 100% solar because of that a large array that we have on the roof. We don't actually need the batteries because we put so much power through, we actually inject it into the network. And we do drain some back at night, but we actually overcompensate. So
right.
It's an interesting arrangement where we actually are feeding power into the grid all the time. We do have some batteries, but we don't rely heavily on them. But it's not something that seems to be done a lot, and that's a bit unfortunate.
Regarding solar, the solar panels used to came, solar panels used to come back in our villages. But the problem with solar panels is that it's very costly, and the maintenance is equally very costly. Those batteries is very costly affair. So 3-4 years back, they used to put solar panels on each electricity poles to have the bulb electric bulbs which used to run by the solar panels. It used to work. It worked for around 6 months to 1 year, but after that, no repair because repair was costly. Battery maintenance of battery was costly. So it was not a very sustainable development. In our villages, still the source of electricity is the normal electricity which we get through wired connection. People do store in the battery, and then they use inverters. And so during the time of electricity is off, then they use the inverters from DC to AC current. That's how they manage during those hours. But solar panel didn't work in our village, sadly.
It's still a cost issue, but hopefully things are improving there. Other solutions that people have or other challenges? We're nearly at the hour, so I'm happy to continue just a bit longer, but has anyone got any particular comments or solutions?
Bruce, I just had one comment. In terms of solutions, there's a very nice book by a gentleman named Pollock that I put in the link in the chat. And there are many examples of solutions, but his major point is that you should never embark on any solution or attempt any solution until you've talked to 100 people on the ground.
Yeah.
That's it. That's his major theme. And it's a lovely book. Paul Pollock died about, I don't know, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, and went all over the world doing just that, and came up with solutions that were not only relevant to the population, but also where the entire production of that innovation was contained within the microcosm of the economy in that environment. So all of the stages of production, all of the stages of processing, all of the profit went back into the community. By the way, I apologize for that link from the Nigerian group. I had just pulled that from the WHO site, and I wonder if Lizzie can give us a better link.
So much agree with you, Bill. This we learned from the villages. Not only we take their idea, not only we go and talk, we take their ideas also. And that becomes more productive and probably cost effective also.
And that self-sufficiency is really important. I think I love Bill's comment about needing to have 100 people that have done it on the ground. And I think that's good. Which of the references is that, Bill? Is
Business Solutions to Poverty. Business Solutions to Poverty by Paul Pollock. The other book that I mentioned, by the way, that I love is Esther Duflo. Pratyush, you talked about impact. She has a lovely model for using communities as the unit of analysis in assessing impact. She and her husband just won the Nobel Prize in economics, and her TED Talks are wonderful. She's one of my heroes, and she uses randomized controlled trials with communities as the unit of analysis. Fascinating work. It's a bit of a big book, but it's a good one. You don't have to read the whole thing.
That sounds great, Bill. Yeah, I think rural communities are the solutions for rural communities, but we need that cross fertilization. So
the other thing, I don't want to dominate things, but just if there are other books that people have, as you can tell, I'm a big believer in learning through books. And what books like that do is give us a common starting point for a discussion. And so sometimes it's a nice strategy to find a really good book that helps us, and then have a group of people read it and then talk about it. It just gives us some common basis to start a discussion.
I'll certainly look up that business solutions to poverty. I note it's not a link, but there Bill's got it a little bit further up on the chat. So I'd encourage you all to go and have a look at that. But sounds just what we're talking about, Bill.
And then one final thing is that I did put a link to Engineers Without Borders, which is another group that I'm a big fan of. Their basic policy is never start a project unless you have 3 partners. First is community, second is academia, and third is business. So they have that prototypical policy for all projects. It's been around for a long time. There are branches all over the world. I know there's a branch in India, and they also have interesting student chapters. So it's a lively organization. I'm most familiar with the U.S. branch, which is doing good work.
Sounds like a very useful link there, and I do like the business solutions to poverty too. So just to remind everyone that was business solutions to poverty, and was it Engineers Without Borders, Bill?
Yes, sir. And the
Excellent.
link to the international branch is in the chat as well.
That's great, and I think will give us some good leads to go on then, because we do need to encourage this sort of innovation and have it come from rural areas. Is there any final comments? We're just a little bit over, and I'm conscious of everyone's time on a Saturday. Has anyone got any final comments before I hand over to Pratyush to just summarize and wind up? No particular comments, Pratyush. It's over to you to wind up, and hopefully, as I said, we can get these details out to you soon, and we can continue on with some of the chat. Over to you, Pratyush.
So thank you everyone for joining us for this discussion, and we had got very nice comments from you all. And what I feel that the solutions for all these challenges are there within the communities. We need to recognize them, and we need to nourish them further, and we also need to incentivize them. If we are getting some clues, if we're getting some solutions, we need to just do a rural branding kind of things. We need to recognize their efforts, incentivize them, and we need to make sure that whatever interventions, whatever solutions we are thinking about is acceptable to them. We also need to make sure that it's culturally appropriate. What's the use of a solution which is not very culturally appropriate and not acceptable? We also need to make sure that it's financially sustainable. Otherwise, government won't accept it. We have seen over a decade, we have passed from MDGs to SDGs and nothing materialized. So we need to make sure that all those global solutions, what are the big companies, donors are promoting, are also very much rurally viable solutions we need to discuss. And that's the future for not only for the climate change, but for everything. We need to make sure that we we first think of rural communities, and we make sure that it's viable in the rural areas. Then only we'll succeed. Thank you.
Thanks, Pratyush. And that's a wonderful closing comment, I think, that the rural solutions need to come from rural communities and rural people. We're having a little bit of a break over the next few weeks with the Christmas New Year time, and then we're getting back together on the 9th of January for a rural cafe about celebrating the joys of rural practice. So we look forward certainly to catching up with you all at that stage. And thanks everyone for your comments and contributions tonight. I think there's a saying in Indigenous, there's a song actually from an Indigenous artist in Australia that from little things, big things grow. And I think we've talked a lot about that tonight. And there's a lot of opportunity for that to happen. So thank you all. And we look forward to catching up with you. Have hopefully a well-earned break if you can do it over Christmas and New Year. And we look forward to catching up on the 9th of January.
And on behalf of Tough, I just want to say thank you to Bruce and thank you to Pratyush. This is a terrific, it was well worth waking up early in the morning. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everybody, and a Happy New Year to everyone. Happy Christmas and Happy New Year. Happy New Year.
Happy Christmas, everybody.
Happy holidays, everyone.
Yeah. Bye-bye.